The throne room of the alien empire shook with a sound that made even the strongest warriors freeze in fear. It was not the sound of battle, not the roar of engines or the clash of weapons. It was the cry of their queen, a cry filled with pain, fury, and grief. Her tears fell like drops of fire upon the crystal floor, and every soldier and servant bowed their heads. Her daughters, the twin princesses of the empire, had vanished in the night. The palace guards had searched every corridor, every chamber, every shadowed hall, yet there was no sign of them. The queen stood tall, her long dark cloak trailing behind her, her golden crown gleaming under the pale lights, but her heart felt broken. The silence around her throne was heavy, broken only by the echo of her sobs. "Find them," she commanded, her voice shaking, yet filled with power. "Search the stars, search the void, search the homes of every alien race, bring them back to me." Her words rolled like thunder, and the generals dropped to one knee, swearing their loyalty. The empire had faced many wars, but nothing shook it like the loss of the royal daughters. Rumors spread quickly beyond the palace walls. Whispers carried across the city and then across the systems. Some said raiders had stolen the girls. Others claimed traitors within the court had plotted this. But one rumor spread faster than all the rest: that humans were involved. Humans, a small and fragile species compared to the empire. They had always been seen as unpredictable, clever, and dangerous. The queen's grief soon twisted into suspicion. Her mind pictured humans stealing her daughters, caging them, using them as tools. She rose from her throne, her tall frame casting a shadow across the hall. Her eyes glowed with cold fire. "If humans are behind this," she whispered, "I will burn their worlds until nothing remains." The courtiers trembled, for they knew her words were not empty. When the queen declared war, entire civilizations vanished. Outside the palace, the city itself mirrored the queen's sorrow. Towering spires of silver metal loomed under the red sky. Banners bearing the royal crest were lowered to half height, and temples filled with people offering prayers for the safe return of the princesses. Families lit candles, children wept, and priests lifted their voices in ancient chants. The whole empire felt the wound of their queen, but the queen herself could not rest. She locked herself in the chamber where her daughters once played. Small toys lay scattered on the polished floor. Soft laughter still echoed in her memory. She touched the carved wooden animals her daughters had loved. She pressed her hand against the wall where they had drawn their childish pictures with glowing chalk. The emptiness cut deeper than any blade. As the night grew darker, she summoned her elite hunters. They were tall, armored figures with eyes like burning coals. Their task was clear: find the daughters, track them across worlds, and bring them home, no matter who stood in the way, no matter what blood had to be spilled. The queen's tears fell once more, but this time they were not only tears of grief, they were tears of rage. In her heart, sorrow had joined with fury, and fury demanded justice. The galaxy would soon feel the storm of a mother's wrath. Far away, whispers of her anger already reached alien diplomats and spies. Some trembled at the thought of war, others prepared to use the chaos for their own gain. Yet none knew the truth. None could imagine that the lost daughters, the precious jewels of the empire, were not in chains, not in a dungeon, not on a raider's ship. They were lying in peace, far from the palace, far from the cries of the city, resting against the chest of a single human, his heartbeat steady, his arms wrapped around them. The daughters safe and dreaming under his roof, while the queen wept, while the empire shook. The truth slept quietly in the arms of the one she had sworn to destroy. And so part 1 ends with a broken queen, her vow echoing in the air, her rage pointing toward humans. Her tears are the start of a fire that will burn across the stars, a fire that will reveal not only danger and fear, but also a bond that no one in the galaxy had expected. The forest world was quiet, the kind of place where time moved slowly. Birds sang in the morning light, rivers whispered through the trees, and the wind carried the scent of pine and damp earth. It was here, far from the noise of empires and wars, that a lone human had made his home. His name was Daniel, a man who wanted nothing more than peace. He lived in a wooden cabin he had built with his own hands, his days spent hunting, farming, and repairing the tools that kept him alive. Daniel had once been a soldier. He had walked through burning cities, fought battles he never wanted, and buried friends whose names still echoed in his dreams. When the war ended, he had chosen exile, a life of silence where no one could demand anything from him. For months he lived this way, speaking to no one but himself and the small animals that roamed his land. But one evening, as the sun dipped low and the forest turned gold, Daniel stepped into his cabin and froze. On his rough bed, wrapped in his old blanket, lay two small figures. Their silver hair glowed faintly in the dim light. Their skin shimmered with the pale blue hue of their people. Their eyes were closed, their tiny hands curled against their cheeks. They were children, not human children, but alien. Daniel's heart stopped. He knew their faces. Every merchant and trader in the galaxy had seen the images. The missing daughters of the alien queen, the ones for whom entire armies now marched, the ones whose disappearance could spark a war that would consume stars, and they were lying here, in his cabin, as if the universe itself had placed them. In his care, he moved closer, his boots creaking on the wooden floor. One of the girls stirred, opening her eyes just a little. The glow in them was soft, tired, filled with fear. She did not speak. She only reached out her small hand and gripped the edge of his shirt. Daniel froze. He had fought beasts larger than ships, but nothing had ever made him feel so fragile. He whispered to himself, "What are you doing here?" But the girls did not answer. They were too weak, too hungry, too exhausted to explain. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. He should report this. He should call someone, but he could not. He remembered the eyes of the queen when she declared vengeance. He remembered the stories of alien hunters who would tear apart anyone suspected of betrayal. And more than that, he remembered his own childhood, the hunger, the nights without shelter. He looked at the girls and saw not princesses, not symbols of war, but children who needed warmth. So he built a fire. He placed a pot of stew on the flames, the smell of herbs and meat filling the cabin. The girls stirred again, drawn by the scent. They sat up slowly, clutching the blanket around themselves, their eyes wide but still cautious. Daniel poured soup into wooden bowls and pushed them across the table. The younger one hesitated, then took a small sip. Her sister followed. Soon their small hands were moving quickly, spoon after spoon, as if they had not eaten in days. Daniel watched them, his chest tightening. He had not felt this in years. This quiet pull toward something larger than himself. When the bowls were empty, the younger one leaned against him, her head resting on his chest. His heartbeat was steady, strong, a sound she seemed to trust. He froze again, unsure, but then slowly wrapped an arm around her. The other girl climbed closer too, curling against his side. Within minutes they were asleep, breathing softly, their small forms pressed against him. The firelight flickered across the cabin walls. Daniel sat in silence, holding the daughters of the most powerful queen in the galaxy. His mind raced with questions. Had they escaped? Had they been abandoned? Or had someone placed them here to test him? He had no answers, only the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. Outside, the forest whispered, but beyond the trees, far beyond the skies, hunters were already searching. Soldiers armed with blades of fire, tracking systems that could smell out fear, and ships that moved faster than light. They were coming closer each hour, and when they arrived, they would not ask questions. They would see a human with the lost princesses, and they would kill, but for now in that quiet cabin the truth was hidden. The daughter slept peacefully against a man who had long forgotten what it felt like to protect anyone, and for the first time in years, Daniel felt the weight of his heart stirring. He had no plan, no path forward, but he knew one thing. He could not let them go. Not yet, for in their silence, in their trust, he had found something worth more than his own life, and deep within he feared what would come when the queen's tears led her armies to his door. The morning sun broke through the trees, golden light spilling into the cabin. Daniel stirred awake, his back stiff from sleeping in the chair. He looked down and saw the two alien girls curled against him. Their breaths were soft, their faces peaceful. For a moment he simply sat still, not wanting to break the silence. He gently pulled away and rose to his feet. He moved to the small stove and began cooking breakfast. The crackle of fire and the smell of sizzling bread filled the room. The girls woke slowly, blinking their glowing eyes. They looked around with fear at first, but when they saw him, their shoulders relaxed just a little. Daniel smiled awkwardly. "Hungry again?" he asked, knowing they could not understand his words. He pushed plates toward them, bread and fruit gathered from the forest. The younger one reached first, taking small bites. Her sister watched him carefully before eating too. Their movements were quiet, cautious, yet there was something growing between them. Trust. The girls spoke to each other in their alien tongue, a language of soft tones and glowing whispers Daniel could not understand, but he could feel their meaning in their voices. Relief, safety, the strange comfort of being near him. They kept glancing at him, their eyes showing both curiosity and gratitude. Later that day, Daniel stepped outside to chop wood. The girls followed him, staying close to the cabin door. They watched as he raised the axe and split the logs. Their eyes widened at his strength. He noticed their fascination and chuckled softly. To him it was simple work, but to them it seemed like magic. The younger one picked up a small stick and tried to copy him. Swinging clumsily, Daniel knelt beside her, showing her how to grip it. He guided her hands gently, and she smiled for the first time. Her sister watched from the doorway, her face softening. She had not smiled since they arrived, but now a small spark appeared in her eyes. The day passed quietly, Daniel showing them the garden he kept, the traps he used to hunt, the stream where he fetched water. The girls followed everywhere, staying close, never letting him out of sight. Each time a branch snapped or a bird cried, sharply they flinched, hiding behind him. Their fear was deep, carved into them by the days before they reached him. That night the cabin was warm from the fire. Daniel sat by the flames, repairing an old leather strap. The girls sat beside him, wrapped in blankets. The younger leaned against his chest again, listening to the steady beat of his heart. The older one, still cautious, sat close but did not touch. Her eyes stayed fixed on him, studying every movement. When he looked up, he saw her watching. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. It was not language, not words, but understanding. She saw not an enemy, not a soldier, not a stranger. She saw someone who cared, someone who had chosen to keep them safe. Daniel spoke softly, even though he knew they could not understand. "I don't know why you're here," he said, his voice low, "but I'll keep you safe, I promise." The younger one sighed and snuggled deeper into his chest. The older one blinked, then whispered something to her sister. Her sister nodded, and together they closed their eyes, trusting him. Outside, the forest was quiet, but danger was near. Far beyond the trees, alien hunters traced their steps, following signals, searching for the royal daughters. Yet inside the cabin, a fragile bond was forming, a bond of silence, of small gestures, of shared warmth. Daniel lay awake long after the girls slept. He thought of the queen, of her tears, of the armies that would come. He thought of what would happen when they found him. He could hand the girls over, walk away, return to his lonely life. But each time he looked at them, he knew he could not. He had found something worth more than his solitude. As the fire burned low, Daniel closed his eyes. The younger one's small hand rested against his chest. The older one's head leaned slightly toward him. He breathed deeply, feeling a strange peace he had not felt in years. And in that moment, as the stars shone, above the forest a silent bond was sealed. A bond between a broken man and two lost daughters. A bond that would soon be tested by fire, by blood, and by the queen's wrath. The alien queen stood at the edge of her war map, stars glimmering across the floating hologram. Her generals knelt below her throne, their voices low as they reported the latest news. Ships had searched a dozen worlds. Soldiers had stormed villages and outposts, but still there was no trace of the princesses. The queen's hands clenched into fists, her long nails cutting into her palms. Her eyes burned. She could not accept failure, not when her daughters were still out there. "Send the hunters," she commanded. Her voice shook the chamber. "No more delays, no more excuses, find them." At her order, shadows moved. From the back of the hall stepped her most feared warriors, cloaked in black armor, their faces hidden behind glowing masks. The hunters trained in silence, trackers who could follow a whisper across the stars. They bowed once, then vanished into the dark. The queen's tears were gone now, replaced by a storm that would not rest until her daughters were found. Far away on the forest world, Daniel felt unease stir in his chest. He stood outside his cabin, axe resting on his shoulder. The girls were inside, watching through the window. The air was still, but something felt wrong. He had learned long ago to trust his instincts, the same instincts that had saved him in war. And now those instincts told him that someone was coming. The hunters moved like shadows through the woods. Their ships had landed miles away, silent. As falling leaves, they spread in small groups, scanning the ground, following faint traces of energy and scent. One of them knelt, brushing his fingers over a broken twig. His mask glowed as it confirmed the trail. "This way," the hunter whispered. Daniel kept the girls close that night. The fire burned bright in the cabin, but the darkness outside pressed heavy against the walls. Every sound made the younger girl cling tighter to his arm. The older one sat awake, her eyes glowing faintly. Watching the door, Daniel had tried to comfort them with food, with stories told in simple words, but nothing eased the tension. He knew something was hunting them, and it was only a matter of time before it found them. In the Empire's capital, the queen paced her chamber. Each step echoed like thunder. She remembered the soft laughter of her daughters, the way their hands had held hers. She could not sleep. She could not eat. Every thought burned with one image: her children in human hands. Her spies had whispered that a human settler might have them. The queen's fury grew. She pictured a fragile man holding what was hers, and her rage shook the stars. Back in the forest, the hunters drew closer. Their boots left no sound. Their weapons shimmered faintly, designed to cut through flesh and bone with a single strike. They saw the cabin lights through the trees. The leader raised his hand, signaling silence. They crouched, watching, studying, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Inside, Daniel laid the girls on the bed, covering them with blankets. He whispered softly, though they did not understand. "Sleep. I'll keep watch." The younger girl clutched his shirt until her eyes closed. The older one turned her head, still awake, still staring at him. He gave her a small nod, and at last her eyelids grew heavy. The night deepened. Daniel sat by the window, rifle across his knees, his breath slow, his eyes sharp. He did not know exactly what hunted them, but he felt it. The forest was too still, too quiet, as if the animals themselves had fled. Then, in the distance, a faint glow moved between the trees. Daniel tightened his grip on the rifle. The glow shifted again, closer this time. He could not see them, but he knew. Someone was out there. The hunters circled. One moved left, another right. Their leader raised his blade, ready to advance. But something stopped them. The girls inside, stirred in their sleep, a faint pulse of energy flowing from their bodies, a royal bloodline glow that shielded them for just a moment. The hunters stepped back, recognizing the sign, confirming their prey was here. The leader whispered through his mask, "Found them," and sent the signal. Back in the palace, the queen received the message. Her breath caught. Her daughters were alive. She clenched her fists, whispering, "I'm coming." But she did not know. She could not know that when she arrived, she would find not an enemy holding her children hostage, but a man who had given them safety, warmth, and a chest where they could finally sleep in peace. The hunters moved again, surrounding the cabin like wolves. Their shadows stretched across the forest floor. The night held its breath. The first confrontation was about to begin. The cabin sat silent under the pale moon. The forest around it seemed to hold its breath. Daniel stood near the door, rifle in hand. His eyes scanned the shadows between the trees. He could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching him. The bond with the girls had grown strong in only a few days, and he knew he could not let harm touch them. Inside, the princesses stirred in their sleep, their dreams uneasy, the glow of their skin flickering faintly in the firelight. The younger one whimpered. Clutching the blanket tighter, the older opened her eyes and sat up, sensing what Daniel already knew. Something was coming. The hunters moved like smoke through the forest. Their leader raised a hand, signaling the attack. They spread in silence, blades ready. They had found the daughters, and nothing would stop them from completing their mission. Daniel heard at first a branch snapping under a heavy boot. He raised his rifle and stepped outside. The cold night air brushed against his face. He saw nothing at first, only darkness. Then the glow of a hunter's mask flared between the trees. His breath caught. He knew this was no ordinary enemy. "Stay inside," Daniel whispered to the girls without turning. He closed the door behind him, leaving them in the safety of the cabin. Then he stepped forward, shoulders squared. The hunters emerged from the dark, 6 figures in black armor, their glowing masks shifting with strange patterns. They spread out, circling him. Their leader stepped closer, voice deep and cold through the mask. "Human," he said. "Stand aside." Daniel did not move. His grip on the rifle tightened. His voice was calm but firm. "They're children. They're safe here." "They are the Queen's blood," the hunter replied. "They do not belong to you." Daniel felt the weight of those words. He was just a man, alone in the forest, facing warriors bred for the hunt, yet he could not step aside. His chest tightened as he thought of the girls clinging to him, the way they had trusted him. Their safety mattered more than his own life. "You'll have to go through me," Daniel said quietly. The hunters raised their blades, a shimmer of deadly light filling the air. The leader took one step forward, but before he could strike, the cabin door creaked open. The princesses ran out, their small feet thudding against the wooden steps. The younger one grabbed Daniel's arm, holding on tight. The older stood in front of him, her glowing eyes fixed on the hunters. Her voice rang out in her alien tongue, sharp and filled with defiance. The hunters froze. Their masks flickered as they processed her words. The leader lowered his blade slightly. He had not expected this. The daughters were not captives. They had chosen to stand with the human. Inside Daniel's chest, relief and fear tangled together. He knew the hunters might not care. They could still take the girls by force. His finger hovered near the trigger of his rifle, prepared for the worst. Then the sound of engines filled the sky. A great shadow passed over the forest. The trees shook as a massive ship descended. Light flooded the clearing, and the hunters knelt instantly. Their queen had arrived. Daniel's heart pounded. The girls clutched him tighter as the ship's ramp lowered. The alien queen stepped down, her cloak trailing behind her, her crown gleaming under the ship's lights. Her eyes scanned the clearing until they fell on him, a human holding her daughters. Her face twisted with fury. The hunters parted as she strode forward. Her voice cut the air like a blade. "Release them," she ordered. Her power pressed down on him, like the weight of a storm. Daniel shook his head, his voice steady though his hands trembled. "They're safe. I won't let anyone hurt them." The queen's rage grew. Her soldiers raised their weapons, ready to strike. The hunters waited for her command. The air burned with tension. One word from her, and Daniel would be ash. But before the order came, the princesses moved. The younger one stepped in front of him, arms spread wide. The older clung to his arm, her voice rising again. This time she shouted one word the queen understood. "Safe." The queen froze. Her eyes widened. She looked at her daughters, not afraid, not broken, but standing by a human as if he were their protector. Her fury clashed with her grief. For the first time since their disappearance, she hesitated. The forest held its breath. Daniel stood with the girls pressed to his side, facing the queen of an empire. His life balanced on the edge of a single choice. And in that moment, the confrontation hung heavy in the air. The queen's tears, her fury, the girl's bond with a human, All of it collided beneath the cold moonlight. The decision she made next would decide the fate of worlds. The clearing was silent. The hunters stood ready, their blades glowing. The Queen's soldiers aimed their weapons, and Daniel stood firm. With the princesses pressed against him, the moon cast silver light on the scene as if the whole forest was watching. The Queen's eyes blazed with fire. She saw her daughters holding onto the human as if he were their shield. Her chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. Rage filled her heart. But behind it, something else stirred. Confusion. She stepped closer, her cloak brushing the dirt. "Why? Do you cling to him?" she demanded, her voice trembling with power. "He is human, he is nothing. Release yourselves and come to me." The younger girl shook her head. Her small hands gripped Daniel's shirt tighter. Her voice cracked as she spoke in their alien tongue. The hunters' masks translated her words for all to hear. "Safe," she whispered. "He kept us safe." Gasps spread through the soldiers. The hunters exchanged uneasy glances. The Queen froze. Her daughters had spoken of safety, of protection, and the one they pointed to was a human. Daniel swallowed. Hard. His rifle still hung at his side, but he did not raise it. He knew this was not a moment for weapons. His voice was low, steady. "I found them alone, hungry, lost. I gave them food. I gave them warmth. That is all." The Queen's fury flared again. "Lies," she spat. "Humans steal, humans destroy. Why should I believe you?" Her eyes narrowed, filled with hate. She stepped closer, towering over him, her hand raised as if she might strike. Before she could, the older princess stepped forward. She looked straight at her mother, her voice strong, despite her small frame. "He did not steal us. We ran. We escaped the raiders. They wanted to sell us. He found us. He kept us alive." Her words struck like lightning. The hunters bowed their heads, shame burning through them. They had chased the wrong enemy. The soldiers lowered their weapons, uncertain. Now, their Queen's daughters had spoken the truth. The Queen's breath caught. She looked into the eyes of her children. They were not broken, not harmed, but standing tall beside a man she despised. Her heart twisted. She had imagined chains, cages, pain, but instead she saw blankets, food, and the steady chest of a protector. Daniel's voice broke the silence. "I don't want your war. I don't want your throne. I only wanted them safe." His words were simple, but they carried weight. The forest seemed to lean in, waiting for her answer. The younger princess tugged at her mother's cloak, her glowing eyes filled with tears. "He held us when we cried," she whispered. "He gave us fire. He gave us home." The Queen's hands trembled. For the first time, her tears returned, not of rage, but of recognition. She saw the truth in her daughters' faces, in the way they clung to the human. She had searched the stars, sent hunters and ships, spilled fear across worlds, yet the safety of her children had come not from armies, not from power, but from a single man in a wooden cabin. The hunters lowered their blades one by one. The soldiers dropped to their knees. The truth was too strong to deny. The air shifted, no longer sharp with threat, but heavy with something, new understanding. The Queen's gaze softened. Her voice cracked as she asked, "Why, human, why did you do this?" Daniel met her eyes, tired but unwavering. "Because they needed me. Because no child should cry alone." The Queen closed. Her eyes, her daughters pressed against her legs now, their small hands gripping her tightly. She fell to her knees and gathered them in her arms, her crown tilted as tears streamed down her face. "My daughters," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My stars, my light." But even as she held them, she looked at the human. Her daughters would not let go of him. They still clung to his arm, as if he were a part of them now. The Queen understood then. This man had given them something even she, with all her power, could not. Gentleness. The truth hung in the air like dawn breaking after a storm. The hunters stepped back, ashamed of their suspicion. The soldiers looked at one another, unsure of what this would mean for the future. And Daniel, weary but resolute, simply stood, holding the bond he had never asked for but could not abandon. The queen wiped her tears, rising slowly, her voice steadier now. "You saved them," she admitted, "and for that I owe you more than I can repay." The forest, the hunters, the soldiers, all bore witness to this moment. A queen who once promised fire and destruction now spoke with humility. The truth had changed everything, and as the light of the ship bathed the clearing, the queen's heart shifted, no longer filled with rage, but with something she had not felt toward a human in her lifetime: respect. The clearing still glowed under the ship's lights, but the fury that had filled it was gone. Soldiers who had once pointed their weapons lowered them. Hunters who had moved like shadows stood frozen. And at the center of it all, the alien queen held her daughters close. Her arms trembled as their small hands clung to her cloak and to the human who stood beside her. Daniel remained still, unsure what would come next. He had faced armies before, but never like this. He had not fought them with weapons, but with kindness. Yet he knew the moment was fragile. One wrong move, and blood could still spill on the forest floor. The queen lifted her head, her eyes red from tears. She looked at her daughters, then at Daniel. Her voice shook, not with rage now, but with something far more difficult: gratitude. "You saved them," she whispered. "You gave them what even I could not: safety when I was blind, warmth when I was lost." Daniel shifted, uneasily. His voice was quiet. "I only did what anyone should do." The younger princess tugged on her mother's cloak, pointing at Daniel's chest. "Sleep," she whispered. Her voice carried across the clearing. Translated by the hunters' masks, "We slept there, safe." A murmur spread among the soldiers. Some bowed their heads, realizing that the great empire, with all its power and armies, had been unable to do what a single human had done. The older princess stepped forward. Her eyes glowed softly as she looked at her mother. "We choose him," she said firmly. Her words pierced the silence. They were not a rejection of their mother, but a truth. Daniel had become part of their bond. The queen's lips trembled. She reached out, her hand hovering near Daniel. "Do you understand what you have done?" she asked. "You changed everything. A queen cannot bow to a human, but a mother can." Her voice cracked, and to the shock of all present, she bowed her head. The hunters dropped to their knees. The soldiers followed. The sight was almost unreal. An empire bowing because one man had shown compassion. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had never wanted glory, never wanted to be seen as more than a simple man in a cabin. Yet here he stood, the daughters of the queen clinging to him, the queen herself lowered in respect. His voice was low as he answered, "I don't want power. I don't want reward. Just let them live free. That's all I ask." The queen studied him, her eyes softening. "Then so it shall be," she said. "From this day, humanity will not be seen as weak or dangerous, but as protectors, because one of you proved what none of us believed." The soldiers struck their chests with their fists, a sign of honor. The hunters lowered their blades and turned their eyes away in shame. And in that clearing, something new was born. Not war, but peace. Not suspicion, but trust. The younger princess climbed into Daniel's arms again, resting her head against his chest. The older one held his sleeve tightly, refusing to let go. The queen saw this and did not pull them away. Instead, she touched his shoulder, a gesture of respect. Her voice soft but certain. "They are yours as much as they are mine. Their bond with you cannot be broken." Daniel's throat tightened. He had been alone for years, haunted by battles, driven into exile. Now too small, hands clung to him, and a queen acknowledged him as family. For the first time in a long time he felt whole. The ship's lights dimmed as dawn began to rise over the forest. Birds sang again. The danger had passed, but the memory of this night would never fade. Daniel looked at the horizon, knowing his life would never be the same. The queen gathered her cloak and stood tall again, but her eyes no longer burned with fury. They glistened with something new: respect, humility, and even hope. She turned to her hunters and soldiers, her voice ringing with command. Remember this night. Remember what you have seen. The Empire will not forget the human who protected our future. As the great ship prepared to lift into the sky, the daughters remained by Daniel's side, their small hands gripping him as if afraid to lose him. The Queen did not pull them away. She simply watched, and for the first time, she smiled. And so, under the rising sun, a new bond was forged. A bond between a grieving queen, her daughters, and a human who had expected nothing but found everything. The galaxy would remember this, not as the night of war, but as the night. An empire learned that even the smallest act of humanity could change the fate of stars.